everybody. This is Nick Burbules. I'm a member of the International Academy of Education. This is another in a series of interviews that we're doing with authors of booklets that have been produced in the Educational Practices series. This is a set of relatively short, research-based overviews of major issues in educational policy and practice. Today's guest is Panagiotis Kampylis, who produced a book called Nurturing Creative Thinking with his co-author Eleni Berkey. Panagiotis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and your invitation.
Sure. So I want to start with this question. One of the things I think people sometimes think about creativity or creative thinking is that it's something that people are born with. Some people are just naturally creative, other people are not. One of the basic principles of this book, or premises of this book, is that creative thinking is something can be taught. Can you say more about that general goal and what does it mean to teach creative thinking?
Yes, exactly. I think that there are many misconceptions about creativity and creative thinking and all these kind of things. And what we try to present in this booklet is that we can create the conditions where the natural creativity that all of us can showcase, can emerge, can be visible, and we can use. So it is not exactly to teach creativity, you know, but create the conditions, trigger, the creative spirit that all the people have, and give them the opportunity to be creative. I like very much a quote that I read when I was doing my PhD on creativity, that creativity is like murder, because both depends on motives and they need also an opportunity. I know it sounds a bit peculiar, but it is true. You need the motivation, the conditions, and the opportunity to be creative. So this is what we try to tell through this booklet, that if the teachers create the right conditions, give the opportunity to the students, the rest can be a reality,
Yeah, thank you for that overview. So the book is organized around 8 short chapters, 8 principles, you call them. We're going to spend a minute or two talking about each of these 8. There's much more in the booklet than we can get to in this short interview. But I want to talk about each of these 8 topics or principles individually. The first is another one of those sort of misconceptions, I think, which is many people think that you teach creative thinking when you're teaching art or music or poetry. But one of your premises is that creative thinking is a topic that can be woven into the curriculum across all different subject matters, from mathematics all the way to art, and that it isn't just a topic within the artistic elements of the curriculum. Can you say more about that principle?
Yes, indeed. There is a big misconception about this, that in the arts you can be more creative than in science or in maths or in social sciences and so on. But we know from the research evidence that this is not true. Also, there is another misconception about what we call in the research of creativity about the big C creativity and the small c. I mean, you don't have to be to paint the new Mona Lisa or to do something that is so unique. You can do other contributions that still are creative. So there are all these different misconceptions that many people say that I cannot be creative, I cannot compare with these very creative, very talented people. So this is not for me. Or I do a job that has to do with something that is not art. So in my job, I cannot be creative. That's why we have listed several of these misconceptions, and we try to say to the people that, look, you can be creative in any sphere of your life, of your work, and so on.
Yeah, thank you for that. So second principle, which was kind of interesting, I didn't expect this in this booklet, is the idea of learning spaces, the actual arrangement and configuration of schools and classrooms. And one of your suggested exercises in the booklet is to engage students in a process of redesigning the learning space. in their classroom. Can you say more about that principle?
Exactly. Imagine that the normal setting is to have the teacher lecturing and the students sitting in the row listening. Okay, this gives already a setting that is very much that there is one who knows things and the others that must learn these things. So in order to, as I said at the beginning, to create the conditions for the creative thinking to happen, you need to rearrange the furniture, create corners, have available different materials. So when you are in the creative process, to have all these conditions, materials, and equipment that you need, and also to be able to move, to play with and explore and experiment, this kind of thing. That's why it's very important also how you arrange the space, the learning spaces, because it gives already a message. When you enter a classroom that is, full of these creative, let's say, corner spaces and materials, then you get the message that here, yes, I can explore things. When you have to sit all day in the same seat, do exactly the same things, this gives a totally different message.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember somebody giving a lecture once about a study where teachers saw just a glimpse of a very brief glimpse of a photograph of a classroom, and then were asked what kind of classroom it was. And the photo, I remember the teacher said, well, the students are standing around a table. So it's either an art class or a science class, because in other subject matters, you wouldn't see students working in groups around a table. But of course, it isn't only in arts or science that you could arrange the classroom that way if you were teaching the material in a way that promoted collaboration, discovery, and more hands-on
experimentation. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Third principle is asking open-ended questions and helping students learn how to ask good questions. This is a topic that particularly interests me. What's the role of questions and learning how to ask questions in this process of fostering creative thinking?
Again, imagine that in most of the classrooms, we have one right answer because the questions are closed, and the students must learn or memorize, or in the best case scenario, to find this correct answer. But as a Greek, I know very well the Socratic method that you should make the proper questions that are open and trigger, the imagination, give a room for different thoughts, and of course, make clear that you can have many different answers and all of them to be valid. This is a very clear message because nowadays you will know very well that we have also all these different tools, AI now, these different approaches, but all of them require to make the right prompts, the right questions, in order to get something meaningful. So the problem formulation is even more important than the problem creation. So providing and helping students to learn this very crucial, very key ability to formulate questions, not only to answer to questions, it's very important. That's why you have to start this from the early stages already in the primary education. And also to make clear that there are so many issues that they don't have one correct question. This is very important also for our life as citizens, that we face all these challenges. We know that there is no single solution, no single answer.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
In the booklet, we provide several examples of these questions. But as I said, the most important is that there is no one single correct reply.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. The booklet, we're not getting into it at this level of detail, but the booklet includes not only these general principles, but very specific recommendations of how to implement these principles in the classroom. It's one of the themes across the educational practices set is that it isn't just a review of research. It actually has hands-on practical advice as well.
Trust me, it was one of the most difficult things I had to write, because to synthesize in 1 or 2 paragraphs what the research evidence say, and then provide 3 or 4 paragraphs with very practical advice based on this. It was not easy at all, but I was lucky because I was able to wear both my hat as a researcher and my hat as a teacher. So,
Sure. Well, I
yeah.
thought you did. I thought you and Eleni did an outstanding job with this booklet. Fourth principle: meaningful and authentic activities. Can you say more about that?
Exactly. You know that in many cases we see students sitting and getting bored because they don't understand why they have to learn all this information or to do this and that in the classroom. But when to provide them with something that makes sense to them, it's a totally different story. I mean, imagine that we want to do something in maths, to do some calculations. It's totally different if you create something. I have to calculate where to cut, how to connect things, and so on, because then it makes sense. It's authentic learning than just have a problem that is totally theoretical about other people doing this and that. That's why it's very important when you connect the learning to something that makes sense for the students. I used to create toys with my students, and through this toy making, we were able to learn so many principles of physics, do mathematics, and do other things. But it was something that was playful, fun, and very close to their interest. You know, that's why this is a very important principle. And we know all from our experience, when we do something that we like and have a sense for us, we do it with more, a willingness, and we are more effective at all this.
Yeah, thank you for that. As I got to this point in the booklet, I started thinking that while this booklet is about principles of teaching creative thinking specifically, many of these principles are really principles of good teaching more generally, and encouraging student motivation and enthusiasm across the curriculum. Promoting creativity is maybe part of it, but some of this is just, I think, print-wise.
You are right in the sense that teaching is also a very creative profession. In the sense that every year you have a different cohort of students, different settings, and all this, and all the time you have to adapt. It's not something that you repeat. Sometimes, in my teaching experience, I had to do a similar activity, and in one day can work perfectly with a group of students, and the other day with another group to be a total disaster. You have to adapt to be very fast. That's why also it's very important for the teachers to apply these principles and be ready to adapt and showcase their own creativity.
This also echoes in some ways some ideas from John Dewey, the American philosopher of education. For example, you could have students planting a garden, and they're going to eat the food from the garden, so there's a direct benefit.
Exactly.
But in gardening, you could teach history and science and chemistry and others, and mathematics and other subject matters tied to an activity that's interesting and important and relevant to the students.
Yeah, and it is meaningful because you see that you put a seed and you have a plant, and you see that based on the conditions and the watering and all this, you can have different outputs and all this. Yes, indeed, this is the principle of authentic learning.
The fifth principle is something we've already talked about, which is the principle of collaboration and how collaboration enhances creativity. Can you say more about your thoughts about collaboration?
Yes, actually, this is also one of the misconceptions. The misconception that creativity is something individual, But we know very well that even when we have, a song, okay, and we say that this song, the composer is this, and so on. But in many cases, this composer had some ideas, discussed with some colleagues, played to his partner or her partner, get feedback from the producer. When they did the rehearsal, another musician gave an idea here and there. So at the end of the day, even when we attribute something to a single person, we know that more people have contributed. In our case, for instance, with Eleni, we did all this work based on the work of others. Then we had Professor Stella von Gisniadou, and the editors of the UNESCO booklet series that gave us some comments, some other people that gave us some early feedback. So at the end of the day, although we signed with Eleni this booklet, there are also other people that have contributed. So it's not only our creativity there. That's why we say that collaboration is key. And nowadays that we have all these challenges, we know very well that we have to collaborate with others in our work, in the society, everywhere. And together we can be more creative because we can improve ideas and, make the final products even more creative and better.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the next principle is using educational technology to promote creative thinking. And this booklet was produced in about 2014. Some of these issues maybe look a little bit different today, but I thought what was interesting was not just using technology, but how we use technology.
Exactly.
Path towards creativity and creative thinking.
I have seen many times teachers to have all these whiteboards and fancy equipment and all this, and use them in a very conventional way to start and do lecturing and just to use the whiteboard to make notes like in the old blackboard,
Sure.
And I see also with very basic technology to do amazing things, I remember, for instance, back in the 90s, I used a small software that it was in the Windows that you can record. You were able to record something and see the wave, the sound wave. Okay, and I used this in order to ask my students to read something. I was recording them, and then they were able to see how they read. Because if you read very loud, you see the wave goes bigger. If you read very fast, the wave goes shorter. And so this was an amazing way to, improve their reading skills by visualizing their reading using a very basic technology. That's why it's not the technology you use, but how you use it. And of course, technology can give you all these new possibilities, new ways of doing things, doing better things or doing things better, these two different ways.
Yeah, I like that point, and I think it again, it's another one of the misconceptions that people think that this always means the newest and the best and the fastest and the most sophisticated technology. Not necessarily, as you just said. Sometimes relatively simple technologies can be used in ways that are highly creative, and it doesn't always mean. And sometimes, on the other hand, using things that are the newest or the best doesn't necessarily mean that you're using them in a creative way.
Of course, on the other hand, I have to admit that what is very frustrating is when we want to use the technology, old or new, whatever, to be functional. I mean, something that works and don't let you down. But yeah, as you said, the important is how to use all these different things. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another principle is one that I really like. It's a line that I use a lot also in my classes. The importance of allowing for mistakes and risk-taking, which is a really crucial part of creativity and developing a sort of a willingness to take chances.
Yes, this is connected also with the principle of the questions. For instance, as we said, there are many problems that have many different answers. So it's very important also to explain to the students that all these great products that we see by other people is not the first try. Many people try again and again. We have the famous example of Edison that did more than 1,000 different attempts in order to create the bulb and all this. And the most important is that you see the failure as a learning experience. Okay, I tried this, didn't work. Okay, let's do something different, change this and that. As we said earlier with the plants, I put the seed in this one, I put more water, in the other less, to see what happened. So even if one of these fails, then I learned something.
Mhm.
And that's why it's very important to don't be afraid to fail, okay, and to take sensible risks. Of course, safety is first, but on the other hand, I see many times teachers saying, no, I don't give them to cut things because they can cut their fingers. But our argument is that you have to help them to teach them how to do it without putting, their safety in danger. But this is one of the most important things because unfortunately, in the school systems, in many cases, failure is something you have to avoid at any cost. But without trying new things, you cannot be creative.
Sure. And of course, as you said earlier, that also relates to the creative aspect of teaching as well. Taking risks and being willing to make mistakes as a teacher also.
Yes, because many times I had to say to my students, look, we'll try something. I don't know if it will work. And when I had a failure, I was celebrating this. I said, okay, next time we'll succeed. No worries. We'll repeat. We'll try again. Yes.
Well, I've been teaching a long time. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Me too. But the most important is do not repeat the same mistakes.
That's the goal. That's right.
Yeah.
So the final principle is also a really interesting one and somewhat surprising. You talk about the role of assessment. And again, I think many people would say creativity is something that you can't really assess in the ordinary way. But of course, you're talking about different ways of thinking about the processes of assessment. Can you say more about that principle?
Yes, this is not only a big challenge for creativity, but for all skills and competencies. We have the same issue. Recently, we published also another report about computational thinking, for instance, or we know the same is true for digital competencies and all this kind of thing. We cannot assess skills and competencies using the same old methods that they have, just one correct answer, and it is just on pencil and paper and this kind of things. That's why we say that in order to assess creativity, you have to find new ways. And we can do this because all of us, we agree that this is something, a creative product, a creative way of doing things, whatever. So, and we have research studies that say that although people, they don't have the same definition of creativity, and there we have many different conceptions, we have a very good consensus about what is creative as an output, as and we can find other ways to assess this. But this is very important because at the end of the day, if you don't assess something in the school, you see that teachers don't pay so much attention, and at the end we don't have this skill or whatever to be really in the core of their activities. Because I fully understand this, because teachers have also to focus on other things that are the ones that are used for the appraisal of their performance, of the school performance, and so on. That's why it's very crucial if we really want to help students to be more creative. We have to find ways to put also creativity as one of the criteria that we use for their evaluation, their assessment.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. Panagiotis, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. This is, I think, a great introduction to the main ideas in the booklet. There's a lot more in there than we could possibly get to in this short interview. But I think it's a really outstanding book that, as you say, really goes directly at some important misconceptions in how we think about creativity and teaching creative thinking. So thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope that teachers can find this booklet helpful. Although it was written almost 10 years ago, I think that the principles are still valid. And nowadays we need more and more creativity, because with all these new developments with AI and so on, creativity is something, very important human ability that we have to nurture further. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.